Hello and welcome to a journey into the belly of the global beast, or as it's less dramatically known, the G20. We're talking about a group of nations representing 80% of the world's economic output. That's right, 80%. To put it in perspective, that's more economic power than a toddler with a fistful of your credit cards at a toy store. Over the course of this video, we'll unpack the G20's origins, its purpose, its members, and how its decisions impact everything from your morning coffee prices to the climate crisis. So buckle up, because we're about to dive headfirst into the bureaucratic whirlwind that is the G20. Trust me, it's going to be a wild ride. The G20, or Group of 20, is essentially a club. A very exclusive club with a strict no commoners allowed policy. It consists of 19 countries and the entire European Union. So who gets to be a part of this exclusive economic club? Well, it includes the big players you'd expect, the United States, China, Russia, Germany, Japan, and so on. But then there are a few curveballs in the mix, like Argentina, which is more famous for its tango and questionable economic policies than its global power moves. The point is, these countries representing around 85% of the world's GDP and two-thirds of its population gather annually to discuss the big issues plaguing our planet. Think of it like a global town hall meeting. Except instead of arguing about potholes and noise complaints, these folks are grappling with things like financial stability, climate change, and international trade. Now, whether those discussions actually lead to anything productive is a topic for another day, but at least they're talking, right? The late 1990s. A time of dial-up internet, questionable fashion choices, and a global financial crisis, the Asian financial crisis of 1997 to 98 to be precise. Currencies plummeted, economies teetered, and the world's financial leaders realized they had a problem. In the aftermath of this economic earthquake, the G20 was born. It started as a gathering of finance ministers and central bank governors, tasked with preventing another financial meltdown. Fast forward to 2008. The mortgage market crisis triggered a domino effect that brought the world economy to its knees. Faced with this financial apocalypse, world leaders decided that maybe those finance ministers needed a little backup, and so the G20 was upgraded to a full-blown leaders' summit, with the first held in Washington, D.C. in 2008. All right, let's break down the G20 guest list. We've got the heavy hitters, the economic titans, the countries that make the world tremble with a sneeze. We're talking about the United States, China, Japan, Germany, France, the UK, the usual suspects. But then things get interesting, because amidst these global powerhouses, you've got countries like Indonesia with its vibrant culture and burgeoning economy. You've got Mexico bringing its delicious food and complicated relationship with its northern neighbor to the table. And don't forget about Saudi Arabia, where oil is king and human rights, well, let's just say there's room for improvement. Oh, and let's not forget the European Union, which, despite being a collection of countries rather than a country itself, somehow managed to snag a seat at the G20 table. It's like the friend who invites their entire book club to your dinner party. So the G20 gets together every year. They sip tea, they shake hands, they pose for photos that will inevitably become memes. But what do they actually talk about during these lavish gatherings? Well, in theory, they're supposed to be tackling the world's most pressing problems. First and foremost, there's the economy. The G20 aims to prevent another financial crisis. Then there's climate change, the slow-motion train wreck that we're all collectively ignoring. The G20 has pledged to reduce emissions, invest in renewable energy, and save the planet. Of course, whether they actually follow through on those promises is another matter entirely. The G20 also dabbles in trade, trying to ensure goods and services flow freely across borders without sparking trade wars. All right, time for a little G20 trivia night. Because nothing says I'm a hit at parties like knowing obscure facts about an international economic forum. First up, did you know that the G20 doesn't actually have a permanent headquarters? That's right. This group of the world's most powerful nations is essentially homeless. Each year, the presidency of the G20 rotates to a different member country, and it's up to that country to host the summit and set the agenda. Think of it like a really high-stakes game of hot potato, but instead of a potato, it's the fate of the global economy. Speaking of the presidency, in 2023, India got to play host. And they didn't disappoint. They even used their newfound power to invite the African Union as a permanent member, which is a pretty big deal. Now let's talk fashion. Each host country gets to dress the world leaders in their traditional attire, which makes for some truly interesting photo ops. And finally, no G20 summit would be complete without a few special guests. Countries like Spain and Singapore often get invited, along with international organizations like the UN, the IMF, and the World Bank. All right, let's cut to the chase. You might be thinking, this G20 thing sounds like a bunch of rich people patting themselves on the back while the world burns. How does any of this actually affect me? Well, my friend, buckle up, because the G20's influence reaches far beyond those opulent conference rooms. The G20's economic policies have a direct impact on your wallet. We're talking about things like interest rates, inflation, and trade agreements, all of which can affect everything from the price of your morning coffee to the availability of jobs in your town. Then there's climate change. The G20's climate policies, or lack thereof, will have a very real impact on the air you breathe, the water you drink, and the planet you leave behind for future generations. The G20's influence doesn't stop there. Their decisions on issues like global health, education, and technology can affect everything from the quality of your healthcare to the kind of future your children will inherit. So yeah, maybe it's time to start paying attention. Okay, we've established that the G20 likes to talk a big game, saving the world, one summit at a time. But behind the shiny pronouncements and carefully staged photo ops, there's a murkier reality. First off, the G20 has a bit of an enforcement problem, or, to put it more accurately, it has no enforcement power whatsoever. The decisions made at these summits are about as binding as a New Year's resolution made after a bottle of champagne. They can make recommendations, sure, but they can't force anyone to actually follow through. Then there's the issue of representation. The G20 has long been criticized for being a club of the rich and powerful, dominated by Western nations, while developing countries are often relegated to the sidelines. And let's not forget about the elephant in the room, climate change. The G20 has made a lot of promises to reduce emissions and transition to clean energy. But the reality is that many member countries are dragging their feet, prioritizing short-term economic gain over the long-term health of the planet. So what does the future hold for the G20? Will it continue to be a forum for empty promises and photo ops, or can it evolve to meet the challenges of the 21st century? Well, as with most things in life, the answer is probably a bit of both. One thing's for sure, the G20 is facing pressure to expand. With the addition of the African Union, the door has been opened for other regional blocs and developing countries to demand a seat at the table. The question is, will the existing members be willing to share their power? Only time will tell. Then there's the issue of digital currency. The rise of cryptocurrencies and central bank digital currencies has thrown a wrench into the global financial system, and the G20 is scrambling to keep up. Expect to see a lot of discussion about how to regulate these new forms of money without stifling innovation. And of course, we can't forget about technology. Artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, data privacy, these are just a few of the tech-related challenges that will keep the G20 busy in the years to come. The question is, can they agree on a set of rules that govern the digital world without resorting to a real-life version of Ready Player One? The future of the G20 is uncertain, filled with both challenges and opportunities. So, there you have it, the G20, a group of powerful nations grappling with complex global issues, often with mixed results. They're like that friend group that's always full of big ideas but struggles to get anything done. But whether you love them or hate them, there's no denying that the G20 plays a crucial role in shaping the world we live in. From economic policies that impact your wallet to climate agreements that determine the fate of the planet, the G20's decisions have far-reaching consequences. So, the next time you hear about a G20 summit, don't just scroll past it. Pay attention, stay informed, and make your voice heard. Because the future of the world, for better or worse, is being shaped in those opulent